Right, and welcome back. You're watching KTN News Diary. Now, the education sector, the Minister of Education has received the biggest chunk in the budget allocation of the 3.6 trillion shillings, where the government did allocate 628.6 billion shillings. And from this allocation, the TVETs institutions have received 28 million shillings, which is an additional of 28 billion shillings. I beg your pardon, which is an addition of 5 billion shillings from the 2022-2023 financial year. This seems to be a good one from the government. In studio, we are joined by Boniface Kamau, who works at the ABC Global, and he is the business development manager, right, for Kenya and Tanzania.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, we've seen different sectors complaining that there's a reduction in the finance bill, in the finance allocation. The Minister of Health stakeholders were complaining that, you know what, we needed to see 100% money allocated to counties and not the big chunk going to the national government. But here we are seeing the Minister of Education having the largest amount of allocation, I mean 628 billion shillings. I know we have a lot of issues and things going on in the Minister of Education.
Yep.
We have the junior secondary school now.
Yes.
So do you think this money is enough in the first place before we say that it's the biggest chunk?
It can never be enough.
Yeah.
But thank you, Purity, for having me this morning to speak about the important matters of education in Kenya.
Yeah.
Now, the allocation by the government, I would say, is a move in the right direction. And indeed, we have to applaud the government for that kind of gesture. Remember, this comes when we are at an all-time high in terms of unemployment in Kenya. In the 2022 KCSE exam, about only 19% of the candidates scored a C+ and above.
Yeah.
So we have about 80% that had C+ and below, which is the cutoff of going to the university.
Right.
More than half of the candidates scored grade D+ and below. Indeed, we must take care of all these candidates and the youths that you are getting every day from our learning institutions. Mm-hmm. And I believe when the government has allocated this kind of money, it should be in a position to change the landscape of the TVET training in Kenya.
Yeah.
We are looking at a shift from theory-based training to practical or industry-based training. And at this point, this kind of money can really help or can inject the much-needed motivation for this kind of training.
Yeah, and just before we look at how this money should be used, because TVETs institutions have received a boost of an increment of 5 billion shillings.
Yes.
Let's talk about, we have, is it a tradition in this country where if, for example, you are a student and you've scored, let's say below even a B+ or a C+, and you cannot really join a university on a regular basis, then you termed a failure, and most of the time that these students end up doing nothing. So how do we get rid of this misconception that you have to get these particular marks for you to, quote unquote, make it in life?
First of all, times are changing.
Yeah.
And the wheel is moving positively on the positive side of these candidates. Globally, the labor market is favoring people with technical skills.
Yeah.
I was listening in KTN News on Saturday. Our PS for TVET sector of the education, that is Esther Moria, was saying that the government is actually in the process of shifting from the theory-based assessment to practical-based assessment, because the kind of technical skills that are needed in the labor market internationally is what we should be developing in our youths. And TVET institutions are in the right place to develop these kind of skills. In the universities, students would concentrate more on research. Yeah. And in the technical institutions is where we are developing the technical skills. We are talking about labor export, because out there in the different countries internationally, we have a shortage of skills or laborers, but basically it is those people who can get the job done.
Yeah.
So indeed, times are favoring this kind of candidates who can be able to do practical work.
And actually, that's what even the CBC is trying to do,
Indeed.
you know, promoting practical work. So
Indeed.
when you talk about shifting from theory-based kind of learning to practical-based or industrial, that's what you're
Yes,
calling it.
yes.
What exactly do you mean by this? And how can you place Kenya in terms of shifting? Because I know we've been making strides with the introduction of the CBC and promoters of TVET institutions and trainings. So how far are we as a country?
I have to applaud our government
Yeah.
for launching the CBC, because at that age we are able to start developing the required expertise in terms of technical skills in our young children. And we are making the positive move in the higher levels when our PS talks about having technical-based assessment. As a country, I would say we have been lagging behind. I have personally been teaching in our TVET institutions for about 14 years.
Yeah.
Better part of that, I have been teaching the international curriculum. And there is a big gap between what you find in the international curriculum offered here in Kenya vis-a-vis our local curriculum. We are still pegged on the theory part of the concepts and models.
Yeah.
In the international setup, the training has moved towards being able to relate with what is happening in the industry. So you would find that, remember, a curriculum framework is composed of 3 important ingredients.
Yeah.
There is the learning outcomes, whatever the learner is expected to know by the end of the training. There is the delivery of the learning outcomes and assessment to check whether the learner has actually gained the knowledge that was required. Now, the learning outcomes, basically, there's usually not much difference from one curriculum to the other or one mode of delivery to the other.
Yeah.
Substantial difference comes in the delivery and the assessments. So in the international market, you find that delivery has moved towards industrial-based or practical-based training.
And let's talk about industrial-based or practical-based. Do these words mean the same? Again, what will it take to shift from the theory-based that we've been used to now the industrial-based or technical, practical-based, as you put it? Yes.
Let me start with what it would take.
Yeah.
The curriculum that we are following needs to shift so that the delivery that is being done in class incorporates the practical elements and what you call the industry interface. They would mean one and the same, more or less cousins.
Yeah.
Practical-based training is where a teacher in class is using the pedagogy that is pegged on showing a student how to do things.
Yeah.
Industrial-based training is where we have industry interface. So the industry, the companies, are part and parcel of the curriculum. So at one point, the students are supposed to get exposure of what they have learned in class in a practical setup within a company. So more or less, they move together. And what happens in a practical-based scenario or industry-based scenario, like in the international curriculum, you find that the curriculum will advocate for modes of teaching, such as micro-teaching, or probably learner engagement. So students actually drive the learning outcomes. So at one point, the students have to go and look at what is happening in the industry. And that forms part of a learning outcome that they were expected to undertake. When it comes to assessment, we are still tilted towards a theory-based exam that mainly focuses on memorizing and remembrance of the models and the theories, etc. In the international market, they moved away from that.
Yeah.
An assessment would incorporate a big percentage of it, practical assessment, but a small part of it will be theory. So in a practical assessment, a student would be required probably to go out and do a research, and that is what will be marked.
You know, I was just like thinking as you spoke that most of the time TVETs institutions are linked to people who've not scored well in school. And I feel like that's one of the challenges why, you know, you just get your grade D and do not want to continue. Is there a way it can be incorporated so that even those that scored high marks in school, they also know that it's important if they wish to enroll in some of these TVET institutions?
Yeah, I must say the government is doing well.
Yeah.
So far, so good. Because we are elevating technical skills even within our labor market. And that makes everybody feel that the knowledge and the education they have is important and is recognized. In fact, when you go to some of the industries, nowadays they don't look at your academic qualifications. They would be more interested in what you can do. And when that kind of emphasis continues to be put across board, and with the kind of money the government has injected in our budget in the TVET education, definitely it will motivate more and more people to move towards the TVET curriculum. Yeah. At some point, I have seen even some students who have scored well to join our universities, willing to go the technical way. And remember, most of them, after graduating from our universities with the degrees, many still go back to our TVET institutions to gain a professional qualification. Yeah. This is because with a professional qualification, a student feels more motivated, and they feel that they have the right skills that the labor market wants. Yeah. We are moving in the right direction. Yes. And you said that many students are usually willing. So what are some of the challenges that face this transition so that we don't see a lot of enrollments into TVET institutions? Is it lack of enough facilities, students are not willing, lack of awareness, or even tutors? Yeah. I would say the government needs to bring in the private trainers within the TVET circle. The government has been leaning towards the colleges or the institutions that are government-sponsored in the TVET arena. Yeah. But remember, they can only accommodate a few of the students that have not joined university and would want to go the TVET route. There's a big chunk of them that is normally left out, and they normally go to the private colleges that we have. The government needs to focus as well on the private institutions. This is to ensure that the students who are left out are able to get an opportunity in those institutions. Yeah. So one hurdle that, or one obstacle that we have been having is where the government has not as well put in place measures to elevate and to enable students to be aware that as well they can join the private institutions. Not everybody can be accommodated in the government institutions. We have a body such as KENAPCO, the Kenya National Private Colleges Association, that is really normally open to engage the government in ways in which students can come to the private colleges and get the same level of assistance and support that students in the government-sponsored colleges normally get. Yeah. Yep. So that's the challenge. Let's talk about advanced business education, ABE. Yep. What you do and how that adds to the TVET sector. ABE is a global organization that was founded in the UK. Registered in England and Wales, and we have been in operation for the last 50 years. In fact, this year we are celebrating our 50th anniversary. ABE is a skills development organization whose curriculum normally attempts to develop skills in areas of business management, human resource management, marketing management, and entrepreneurship, among others. Yeah. ABE curriculum is normally pegged on the industry models. Remember, we have a concept where we view business education as an art. Yeah. But in the developed countries, it is viewed as a science because business models keep on changing. So ABE keeps on updating its curriculum so that what students are exposed to in class is basically what they will find when they go to the labor market. Now, we have already inculcated the kind of training that you are talking about, industry-based training or practical-based training in our ABE curriculum. Our students don't sit for 100% exam. A major part of it is a practical assessment. A student will be sent to an organization and they'll be told to go there and find probably a solution to a particular problem. Or they'll be told to go and assess how a particular model in business environment is working in that organization. Their findings forms part of their final mark. So indeed, this student already has an exposure of what happens in an industry setup. ABE operates in over 40 countries worldwide, and Kenya, we are privileged to be one of those countries. We have had several colleges here in Kenya that train the ABE curriculum. And I would say that our students here in Kenya are doing well. They are competing competitively with our other students globally. Remember, we have moved from a hyper-local social setup to a hyper-connected social setup. And that is why even our government is talking about labor export, because the kind of students we are training should be able to work anywhere around the world. We are no longer training our students to go back and work just within the local setup. When we send them somewhere to Qatar or North America, they should be able to work just competitively as any other student. Our ABE students are trained in that manner.
All right, and hoping that now we will keep on engaging and having this conversation, because we are seeing that the government is also advancing their agenda where encouraging students to enroll into TVET institutions and acquire some of these skills.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for making time for us. We've been speaking with Boniface from ABE, which is the Advanced Business
Education.
Absolutely.
Global. So I'm basically the Business Development Manager in charge of Kenya and Tanzania.
All right. Thank you so much for making time
Thank
for
you,
us.
Purity, for having me.
All right. And that's all the time we had for News Diary this morning. Remember, again, today is World Refugee Day. And, it's giving hope to the refugees and making them feel home away from home on the second hour. That's on the News Center. We shall be having that conversation and having a